The River's Secret. In a small, impoverished village near a shadowy river, there lived a girl named Nneka. She was the middle child among 5 siblings, 3 sisters and 2 brothers, all born into a family trapped in poverty. Their parents worked endlessly, but it was never enough to send all the children to school. As the years passed, one by one, Nneka's siblings dropped out, their dreams crushed by the weight of financial burden. But Nneka's path was different, darkened by something no one could fully understand. Among the siblings, Nneka was different. Her eyes sometimes clouded with a faraway look, as though she was seeing things others couldn't. And indeed, she was. Nneka carried within her a presence, an ancient, powerful spirit tied to the mysterious waters that flowed near their home. From an early age, her family whispered about strange occurrences surrounding her, but no one dared to speak openly. Her auntie, a stern but kind woman, took her in when the family could no longer afford to care for her. But with Nneka's arrival came new fears. Each evening, something terrifying happened. Nneka died. Her hands would twist grotesquely backward, her body would go cold, and for hours she would remain lifeless. Her auntie sat by her side, terrified that this time she wouldn't come back. But each morning, just before dawn, Nneka would gasp awake, her eyes wide with the terror of whatever she had seen in the night. "Where do you go?" her auntie whispered once, though afraid of the answer. "To the underworld," Nneka said softly, her voice almost too distant to be human. It wasn't just her nightly deaths that haunted her. At night, her dreams were consumed by dark figures, shadowy lovers who came to her with twisted desires. She felt their cold touch in her dreams, and when she woke, her body bore the signs. Often, she woke feeling violated, her body exhausted as though she'd been pulled into some nightmarish tryst. Worse, she sometimes felt the symptoms of pregnancy: sickness, vomiting, weakness, but in the physical world, there was no child. In the spirit world, however, she carried something else. Her auntie, once a practical woman, could no longer deny that something unnatural was at play. Nneka's suffering was too real, too constant. Every night, as her niece slipped into death and visited the underworld, the old woman feared she might never wake again. Desperate for answers, her auntie sought the help of relatives, begging them to come and help. But they all turned away, afraid of whatever curse had befallen the girl. But Nneka knew what needed to be done. "I must return to the river," she told her auntie one day, her voice laced with an urgency that chilled the older woman. "I have to retrieve something. A symbol. If I don't, I'll never survive this." The very thought of visiting the river sent shivers down her auntie's spine. The villagers had long avoided the water at night. Stories of dark spirits, of things that pulled people into the depths, were whispered around fires. The river had a secret, and it was tied to Nneka's curse. Her auntie, her fear palpable, agreed. She would help Nneka retrieve whatever it was she had lost to the underworld. Together, they visited spiritualists, men, and women who spoke in riddles and seemed to understand the forces tormenting Nneka. They guided the two on a terrifying journey through 7 rivers, each more menacing than the last. Each stop filled Nneka's auntie with dread, as the spiritualists revealed more and more of Nneka's connection to the dark marine spirits. Every river held a fragment of Nneka's past, her spiritual origin, her ties to the underworld, and the path that had brought her into the world of the living. The final revelation came at a river near Nneka's mother's village. It was here that the spiritualists confirmed Nneka's worst fear. Her spirit had come from the depths of the water, tied to a force too ancient and powerful to be fully understood. The only way to restore balance was for Nneka to return to the river and retrieve her symbol, a sacred object that bound her to both worlds. Without it, her nightly deaths would continue, and eventually, she would not wake. On the day of the ritual, the air felt thick with foreboding. Nneka, dressed in white robes, was led to the riverbank. 8 spiritualists surrounded her, chanting prayers that seemed to echo off the water in unnatural ways. Her auntie stood nearby, her heart pounding with terror, her eyes never leaving Nneka. Nneka stepped into the water, her body trembling as the cold enveloped her. The moment she entered, the chanting grew louder, more intense, as though the spirits themselves were answering. Nneka's eyes closed, and for a moment she seemed to disappear into a trance. She was gone, her body still, as though lifeless. Suddenly, the waters surged, pulling at Nneka with an unseen force. Her auntie screamed, but the spiritualists held her back. They knew the river was claiming what was its own. After what felt like an eternity, Nneka gasped, her body jerking violently. In her hand, she held the staff, a long, dark object pulsing with power. She had retrieved her symbol. From that day on, the haunting stopped. Nneka no longer died at night, no longer journeyed to the underworld against her will. The dark spirits that had tormented her were appeased, and her body was free of the nightly violations that had plagued her dreams. Her life in the physical world transformed, her relationships flourished, and she became a respected figure in the village. But in the silence of the night, when the wind whispered through the trees and the river waters stirred, Nneka would sometimes feel the pull. She had reclaimed her place in the physical world, but the underworld was never far behind. She was no longer just Nneka, the village girl. She was something more, a princess of the underworld, tied forever to the darkness that had given her life.